auditory abilities. Really, all of these are going on underneath, and then you see a really nice, charismatic leader. You see a sister that's amazing at public speaking, or you see a brother that's really wonderful at dealing with teams. But that's happening externally, right? That's outside of it. That's just a little percentage outside of what the deeper inner workings are that are going on. And so for me, development became like a fascination. Human development, adolescent development, and then leadership development, and then leadership psychology. And really, emotional intelligence is under a growing field called leadership psychology. Now, just to be honest, again, I don't know, has anybody done research in psychology, or has anybody with a psych degree or background? Anybody? A couple? Okay, mashallah, one hand, mashallah. So we need more various disciplines in education, right? Because so many things are interplayed when it comes to education. So psychology is a very important one, of course. Well, if you do some leadership, if you do some psychology research, you'll see that where the movement is going is very corporate and very organizational, because big companies are investing a lot of money into having their leaders become better in psychology, right? So there's so much growing field of like mental health counselors in companies, and coaches in companies, and deep psychology training in companies. I'm planning to attend a summit in New York in a couple of months. It's called the Neuro Leadership Summit. The neuroscience of leadership competencies within companies. Right? So it's much more advanced than, for example, the neuroscience of leadership competencies within Muslim youth, right? It's like we're not thinking, we're not anywhere on that field. So there's a lot of money being pumped into the system to train leaders, because companies know they're getting maximum productivity, maximum impact on people, really seeing a really high level of performance returns for when they're investing in their people, what we call talent development or leadership development. But our community doesn't have like a, where is it? The Muslim community, let alone like schools and stuff, but where's the Muslim community schools when it comes to these competencies? So to me, that's the particular, like, wow, this is an important field for us to really dig deeper in and build around and use. So that's the general setting up, because to me, teaching our children to master themselves, lead themselves, is really one of the most amazing abilities, skills, that we can leave a magnificent impact on future generations, right? Them learning this ability of leading themselves, right? And that's what we call that personal leadership brand. So all of this is just a really high-level introduction to what emotional intelligence is and how we can incorporate it in building better leadership abilities within adolescents and teens. Before I move on, are there any questions? Okay, great. So this session will be an overall perspective and a framework. I'll set up the framework. I'll ask some questions around the framework, present to you, and then the next session will be a little bit more like practical skills, strategies, techniques, some in research, some things that I've done in what can improve emotional intelligence in general. Okay? All right, wonderful. We don't have much time, so I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit faster. I'll try to slow it down towards the end. So, emotional intelligence. Let me give you guys a little bit of what we know about emotional intelligence today. So, first question, what are emotions before we're intelligent in them? What are emotions? Okay, raise your hand. I'm sorry, come on, class. Raise your hand. Yes, sister, go ahead.
How you feel? Sad, happy, scared?
Okay, so how you feel? Good. Are feelings and emotions the same thing?
No.
Okay, who says no? Raise your hand. Who says yes? Feelings and emotions are the same thing. What are you talking about? Okay, good. See, our intelligence is a question. See, good, very good. Okay, all right. Anybody else? What does emotions mean? Emotions. What are emotions? Yes.
I think emotion is the action of the feeling.
It's the action of the feeling.
Translation in the English.
You show your happiness.
Okay.
You're sad.
You show your sadness. Okay, mashallah. I want to let you guys know something. I probably know this as an educator or as a parent. Sometimes the simplest questions are the hardest answers, right? This is like this, I don't know why when my young daughter Mary asked me, why is the sky blue? Like I don't really know, right? I just know that it's blue. So sometimes the simplest question is, yes, go ahead, sister.
I don't know. Maybe the feeling, start with feeling feeling, and after time, it becomes an emotion.
So it starts with a feeling, and it ends with an emotion.
Yeah, it takes time to spread as an emotion.
To become an emotion. Okay. Yes, sister.
Actually, emotion is.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My apologies. I pointed to the sister here. I'll come to you right after. Go ahead, sister.
Okay, I'm thinking it as the state of being
Okay.
at a particular time,
Okay. Oh my God.
depending on the environment that you're exposed to.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. I like that answer. It's a good answer. Yes.
Actually, emotion reflects your behavior, reflect your emotion.
Behaviors reflect your emotion.
What you're thinking right now.
Okay.
Or feelings, nobody knows what you feel right now.
Okay. So you think that feelings are deep within you and emotions are the behavior.
Yeah.
What you see outside of the surface, above the surface. Okay, it's interesting. Last one, right here. Yes. Sorry, because of the time. Yes.
Something internal that affects your heart or comes from your heart.
Something internal that comes from your heart. So are all emotions tied to the heart? The medical, biological people will attack you. I'm a bio major, by the way. I used to be in the medical field for a while. So, strict biologists or people of medicine, they're like, oh my God, sister, what are you talking? The heart just pumps out blood, right? Deoxygenated blood inserted, oxygenated blood exerted, that's it. But you're right. There's a component to it that's spiritual. I'm going to go back to it. I kind of skipped over it, but you're absolutely right. There's an element that we learn Islamically that has to do with the heart. Western psychology would never talk about something called the heart. But the divine knowledge speaks about something called the qalb. I'm going to refer to that in a second. But close. Okay, very, very last one. Very last. You guys are okay. There's too many hands. All right, so I'm sure the answers are right. Let me give you the answer. At least the technical answer, right? This is a technical answer. So the technical answer is that emotions are a habit. It's a conscious experience characterized by an intense mental activity. Why did they put the mental activity there? Yes?
Because the feelings start with our brain.
Of course, so if you're going to be...
heart, then it reflects on
Technically, all feelings have to do with the brain's capacity of interpreting it, right? The feelings do not just happen. They're neurotransmitters and hormones that create an intense experience, right? So from a technical perspective, that's what emotions are. Emotions are the process of perceiving a stimulus, a mental activity that occurs, and then an experience that happens. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the technical definition. Feelings, on the other hand, are kind of referred to as that emotional reaction to that perception. Right? It's the emotional reaction, right? So the emotion is the process, if you will.
the whole thing.
Right. Right? And then the feelings are, okay, now what do we understand as the reaction to that? Right? We, as humans, we label it. And we're going to talk about labeling a lot today. But you're just labeling the experience. That's what a feeling is. So happiness is a feeling. But the emotion is the whole process of interpreting a stimuli, the mental activities or cognitions that happen, and then the way your body experiences it, and then we say we're happy. Does that make sense? Is that kind of clear? So emotions are the technical process. The feelings is what we experience. Again, very technical term. So my question to you, by the way, a mood. I was supposed to add also what a mood. A mood is a temporary state of feeling. Right? So that's how you separate emotions, feelings, and moods. That's the kind of the three ways you separate them. Again, it's important when it comes to intelligence, understanding what these simple differentiations mean. Now, research done for the Yale Center on Emotional Intelligence, I highly recommend. Every educator familiarizes themselves with the Yale Center on Emotional Intelligence. They do immense amount of research just on emotional intelligence, particularly for schools. So they researched 45,000 adolescents, youth, on what the top 3 emotions they feel consistently are? Anybody know? Let's guess.
Anger.
So anger, okay.
Anxious.
Anxious, okay. Happiness, okay. Okay, mashallah, very optimistic sister, whoever that was. What are the top 3 is across the country, across America? The top 3 emotions. Depression, okay, good. Okay, the top three are 75% of the emotions that adolescents gave back were negative. 75% of the emotions that they experienced the most, the top 3 were negative. The top 3 in order though, the third is stressed. The second is bored.
Yes.
And the first is tired. Tired. Mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, being tired. Okay? Now how often, now they ask, okay, how often do you feel this way? At least the top one, or the top 3. They said that nearly 80% of the time they're feeling these 3 emotions. Now, they did the study on undergraduates at Yale in particular. So they asked them, hey guys, what's the top 3 emotions that you feel? Same thing. The top 3 answers were frustrated, overwhelmed, and stressed. They asked teachers in America. 45,000 teachers. What are the top 3 emotions you experience? You guys don't share them. You share them with your counselor or your therapist or whoever. It's important to have one. I'm not joking. Number one was frustrated. Number 2 was stressed. Number 3 was overwhelmed, tired, right? Tired. So what we see, by the way, they asked corporate leaders and workforce, the top 3, stressed, tired, and busy. Overwhelmed and busy. So what we see in America is that there's an emotion. We think, oh, it's just the kids, this generation, oh, these millennials, these Gen Z people, right? The emotional state of America is very, very similar from top to bottom. Because obviously there's, by the way, from a developmental perspective, of course, if parents are tired, overwhelmed, stressed, and worried, what are kids? Of course, 100%, right? They did not be parents, but the teachers are parents. The workforce is most likely parents, right? So it's a snapshot of adults in America. And so what you see is that what we find is that there's an immense impact of emotions on our behaviors, right? I'll go back to the slide very quickly. There is no way around emotions impacting your behaviors. Every single behavior requires an emotional process to occur. There is no such thing, we talk about making decisions without emotions. There's no such thing as decisions without emotions. There's no such thing as actions without emotions. They're always there every time. So the more we understand how to deal with these emotions, the more impactful we are. The next slide is some of the research around emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has been shown to, and I haven't talked about it yet, but I'll frame what it is. But what is it shown for us to do? So it's really important in the 3 things that we do in here. Attention, memory, and learning, right? There is no learning without attention and memory, of course. So attention and memory and learning, there's a very positive correlation between emotional intelligence or emotional competencies, whether they're regulatory or outside of your social skills, and your ability to learn. So it's very, very important for us. The other things that it's been shown, again, a lot of this research is done in companies, organizations, decision making, mental and physical health, performance and creativity, and relationship qualities. I can go into a lot of things here, but I think the important things for me to tell you about. So there's a research done with educators, middle school teachers. Any middle school teachers in the house? Okay, mashallah, may Allah bless you guys. That's the hardest group I think in the world. Okay, so I think that middle school is a very tough age. So they did a study with middle school teachers grading exams. So to show you how emotions play a major factor. So they took several hundred educators, they put them in a room, and they had a group write down a really good day they experienced. Write down a little bit about a good day they experienced. They had a group write down a very bad day that they experienced. very, very bad day. Write about it, reflect on it. Then they have a control group. Then they asked them, and they gave all of them, I got several hundred educators, they gave all of them the same exact English, they're English teachers, the same exact English paper to grade. Okay? So the research saw that there was a 1 to 2 full grade difference in the results that came out as compared to the ones that had a negative emotional experience before the grading and the positive experience before the grading. Now, they asked all the educators, did you feel like you had any bias between your experience that you talked about, the bad day or the good day, and your grade? 90% said no bias. Of course, no, I was very non-judgmental. So, when my kids go to you, I have to make sure you're in a good mood, right? I need to make sure that you're in a good mood. Why? By the way, the research has been replicated in many fields. Judges give harsher sentences at the end of the day when they're tired than they do at the beginning of the day. Right? So, does emotions affect your decision making? All the time? Every time. Every relationship, every behavior, it's affecting that, right? So, relationship qualities, right? There's a lot of things I can go into, but I don't have the time. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to jump right into the framework around what emotional intelligence does for teenagers. So, outside of that, then there's studies done just on teens. There's not a lot, unfortunately, but there's growing literature and research around what emotional intelligence training, development does in teens. So we find that the ability to perceive, utilize, understand, and manage emotions within oneself and others is improved upon. We find that, again, now leadership qualities, right? We find that their ability to lead success, to be successful in school, the workplace, and have overall life satisfaction, longitudinal studies, they find that, hey, it's pretty good. There's some indication there that it does. Motivation, very important, emotional intelligence we'll talk about. Decision making, reasoning, critical thinking, ability to adapt to response and challenges or change, to effectively problem solve, to understand and express their own feelings and the feelings of others, has shown to be improved. And last but not least, improved mental health, including the reduction of aggressive behavior, decreased levels of social stress, depression, and anxiety. All within the framework of what? Just building an emotional intelligence program or going through some kind of training around emotional intelligence. There's been really a lot of good results. And there's other results, like improved resilience, feelings of confidence, and so on. Less impulsive. So there's a lot that is really positively correlated between emotional intelligence and particularly being studied within adolescents, teens. What is emotional intelligence? Okay, before I go up, can you maybe tell me, okay, what is this field that is so important to our children, our well-being, our own decision-making, our own behaviors and tendencies? What does it sound like it is? Anybody? Yes. Yes, tell me what do you think emotional intelligence is as a framework? Like just,
For me, it just boils down to empathy.
okay, so empathy. Okay, that's good. Is empathy inside of you or outside of you?
Like putting yourself in other people's shoes.
Okay, is it inside of you or outside of you? Like is it something that's occurring?
Internal feeling.
It's an internal feeling?
But then
It's expressed externally.
It's an external action, right?
Yeah, it's an internal feeling.
Okay, good. I'm just trying to confuse you, sister. That's all. I'm here to confuse. I'm not you know, there's a joke that says educators aren't happy if you're not confused, right? So I'm not trying to be educated. That's a joke, guys. That's a joke. So empathy is an external skill, actually. So it's considered kind of external, right? I told you there's two frameworks, one internal, one external. So it's actually one of those external abilities when it comes to emotion. It has to do with social awareness or perception. Okay, so that's one of the models. Social, and we'll talk about it. So a social competence. What else, though? Yes. Good, very, very good. Excellent. Recognition. Recognition where? Where do they need to recognize? what do they need to recognize? First, what do they need to recognize?
Within themselves.
What? Emotions, good, very, very good. Within themselves and peers, excellent. So that's internal, and that's external, very, very good, excellent. Anything else? A guess? What other part of the frame? Guess?
The ability to use your emotions and not let your emotions use you.
Okay, very good. It's called emotional utility. Very, very good. Excellent. So let me just put the slide. So the 4 frameworks, by the way, there's a couple of frameworks, but I think this is the simplest one to kind of digest every part. This framework says that emotional intelligence has 4 key components. The first 2, if you see, are within the self, and the other 2 are outside of the self, right? So it actually starts within you. First is self-awareness, and the ability to recognize and perceive emotions within yourself. We'll talk about that, inshallah. The second is self-management. Then how are you able to regulate? How are you able to kind of manage your own emotions on a day-to-day moment day-to-day? Then number 3 is your social awareness, right? That's the first step outside of you. Am I aware of what's going on around me emotionally? And last but not least is then relationship management, right? So your how do I manage or how do I utilize, what the sister said very nicely, is how do I influence or utilize or do the things with others emotionally. Very good, those emotional connections. It's a very simple framework, and I think it kind of sets up the idea of where emotional intelligence is. Let me talk about each one briefly. Are there any questions first? So let's talk about first self-awareness. So self-awareness is, again, a high level. We'll go into strategies in the next session, like I mentioned. So self-awareness has to do with a means of being aware of one's own emotions and the ability to identify them, right? So it's not just an awareness, but it's also the ability to identify the emotions while they're occurring. So this is, it allows you to understand multiple things like strengths and weaknesses. It allows you to be aware of your feelings, what causes or triggers certain feelings that you have, like being happy or alarmed or disgusted. These are also, it'll let you recognize your biases, positive or negative associations you have with different experiences or moments and why they're there. There's just an emotional awareness of why it's going on. And then there's the awareness that it is really important to be aware of it before you can manage it. Right? So if there's a lack of awareness, then there's not a strong ability to manage. Very popular, I have a toddler, so I know, right? What we call temper tantrums, right? Temper tantrums, we all associate with 3 and 4-year-olds. But it's really interesting when you see a 34-year-old going through a temper tantrum, right? You're like, wait a minute, hold on a second. What's going on here? I thought this is only for 3 and 4-year-olds. Why is a 34-year-old having a temper tantrum? Well, a lot of it is a lack of awareness and management, right? This is not just some framework for some kids. This is just a universal framework that applies in different capacities at different levels of life. So the awareness is very important. The second is then the management. A person who is emotionally intelligent is able to regulate, the ability to regulate or control emotional reactions. Now it's interesting, for example, Daniel Goleman mentions the ability to do that with integrity and honesty, right? Not to quote unquote fake it until you make it, right? A lot of times, we learned about this I'm taking a class on self-regulation. That's really interesting right now, currently, like I'm in the class. So a lot of times, some research talks about the ability to adopt a script in your life. So every moment of your life, you walk into a script. And you're able to function really well in a script, within that script setting. And it has to do with like, what kind of personality do you have? Do you have a fixed personality? Is it malleable, et cetera, et cetera? So people can fake like emotional experiences, right? Emotional things, when there isn't there's no value or integrity there, right? So they're always playing victim to get attention, or they're always giving you the honest face and they're being deceitful or kind of, we call it insincerity, right? Like we kind of understand it. And people smell it very easily. But it's probably it has a lot to do with having a value-based system that this stems from. And actually, Daniel Goleman particularly, he works with companies a lot. He talks about the value system in self-regulation. And that's a very important concept that he focuses on as well. So in general, again, self-management, self-regulation, the ability to do several things. Moods and feelings are, so an emotionally intelligent person is able to adjust their moods and feelings. They're able to adjust. You can never stop the emotional reaction. This is important. You can never stop an emotional reaction. You can adjust the feelings and moods that you're in, right? Okay, so what did we say emotions are?
Like the process.
It's the process. Stimulus, brain activity, experience. Can you stop the stimulus of fear?
No.
See a tiger, can you not like, I'm not afraid, right? Alligator, I guess in Tampa, yeah, so Florida. Right? You see an alligator. Or you see a snake, can you say, oh, well, we tell our kid, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Right? Don't be sad. Don't be happy. Nobody says don't be happy, right? We're never happy. That's the problem. That's why nobody says it. So, the idea is that you can never stop the process, right? I mean, from a biology, you cannot do that, right? Cortisol is going to be there, adrenaline is going to be there, dopamine is going to be there, norepinephrine. These responses are going to always be there. But what you can regulate is the feeling and the mood.
The expression.
What you're feeling, right? What state I'm going to be in, and how long is that duration I'm going to be in that state, I can regulate that. That's the important part here. And so that's the framework. Again, I'll move, inshallah, I have 10 minutes. The second part here is the third part, sorry. So we went social awareness, second, self-management. The third is, sorry. I made a mistake. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. Right? Social awareness is what everybody kind of referred to very quickly, but it's very important. It's the ability to tell apart, to tell and be aware of emotions in others. This requires things like empathy, which we're going to focus on completely here. That's like one of the best skills when it comes to social awareness, which is empathy. And then, so empathy is very, very important. And you need attention. Your ability to be cognizant, conscious, or attentive. That's important here. We'll discuss that. And last but not least is relationship management. Relationship management talks about several things, including the ability to communicate in a clear and convincing way your expressions and your emotional expressions and the emotional expressions of others. To be able to say what you want to say when it comes to an emotional perspective in a simple and clear way, and to be able to manage relationships with others emotionally in that way. So you'll find that an emotionally intelligent person can communicate ideas, information, and the requests of others effectively. They pay attention to how others react and adjust their approaches to that reaction. They're able to pay attention to emotional response and be able to predict and plan accordingly to those responses. They can be words, nonverbals, and reactions, or the timing of reactions or behaviors that are appropriate. That is the essence of relationship management. Okay? Very, very theoretical framework I presented. I know a lot of theories. But again, inshallah, the idea is that how can we move from theory to practice, inshallah, and you cannot get that in this session. So I hope you can be here for the next session to get a little bit more on that. But I'd love to take some questions for the next couple of minutes. Yes, sister.
It's not a question. It's just a fact of having awareness, understanding of awareness. There was an article a few days ago on BBC talking about something called a decoy factor, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. It's something as simple as if you want to go and buy French fries, and there's like a small size and a large size.
Yeah.
There is something that companies came up with called the medium size, and that's just there. It's actually, if you look at the price, like small could be $2.99, the large could be $3.99, but the medium one is $3.75. So it's like only like 15 cents more you will pay in order to get the large one.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was put there, it wasn't put, it was put for a reason, because you will think, okay, why I would just pay 15 cents more and I would get the larger one. And that is what, like, they understand how people think. I mean, initially it was only the 2 sizes,
Yeah.
but because they want to make you make that decision, so it's basically swayed
Yes.
toward the large, so that you can buy the large one, and they put that decoy factor. In reality, in everything, I'm just going to talk about like even Islamic things, like if you want our students, because our students are facing, this generation in general, facing a lot of problems, Allah, problem with the deen, problem with everything.
Yes.
So you're going to have to be really, really smart in how you make them choose the right thing by coming up with things to make their decisions sway
Yes.
towards the right thing.
Very good. Of course, exactly. Very excellent point. Most everything has been framed in some psychological framework, right? And understanding the tendencies of people, the way they make decisions, how you influence those decisions. Absolutely, it's very good. Excellent. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Yes.
I have a question. You were talking about having a scripted thing that, if you face
Yeah.
the situation.
Yes.
So, and then you talk about honesty and integrity.
Yes.
So, let's say if I'm feeling anxiety and I have a script that says that I'm not,
Yeah.
then is that not
Yeah.
being honest to myself?
Of course.
Like, because with cognitive behavior therapy, that's
Yeah.
basically what you do.
Yeah. I mean, that's excellent. That's an excellent
So
example.
is it like haram then? Like,
Is it haram? It's a lack of self-awareness. It's a lack of honesty with yourself. There's definitely there's an issue there, right? And there's coping mechanisms that are going on for them to be able to, kind of get out of that problem that they're really going through and getting help from others. But you're absolutely right. The scripts that I was talking about a little bit more in terms of like on the positive spectrum, like your personalities. If you're introverted, why are you extroverted in certain environments? If you're extroverted, why are you introverted in certain environments, right? So there's some malleability, there's different like theories behind personality. So that's on the positive end. But yes, in a negative perspective, it could be that. You're right. Yes, so I'll try to feel it more. Yes.
So on a positive perspective of like being able to make it.
Yes.
For example, as teachers, we will go all sorts through the day.
Yes.
So if you convince yourself in 3 minutes that you can get through the day and you can perform well, although you are like dead.
A shot. Yes.
You can actually use that as a positive, like fundamental to help you like turn your ways around, turn your day around. I don't understand how it could be insincere because you're convincing your brain to kind of adjust the emotions that you were talking about.
Yeah.
To carry on.
Yeah, I think, I apologize, I think that's confusing people. So that was a little bit more in terms of, so first, integrity is important so that, so the example I guess that maybe is best is that if somebody's really going through, they're really sad and depressed, but they're always giving the image of happiness. Now they're being honest with themselves. Now, it's from a regulatory perspective, we can agree like that's important, but the awareness and honesty is very, very crucial part of self-awareness. That's what they're trying to talk about. Now, and I think when it comes from, I said Daniel Goleman mentioned that from like a business perspective, is because people are salesmen, people that are in business, they tend to deceive or show a framework of like, oh, this is how we are emotionally, et cetera, but it's not because of a reason of integrity. So he talked about like coming from your values and stemming from what's important to you. And actually your values, if you examine them from that perspective, your values shape a lot of your emotional reactions to things. Because what is important to you affects how you respond to it. And how that makes you feel, how that makes you feel in general. And so that's what he was referring to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
From the research, is there a prime time for when is the best time to teach emotional intelligence? Like for example, for languages, as educators, we know like under the age 7 is the best time to comprehend language. After 12 is
Yeah.
to go down. For emotional intelligence, I know we're talking about teen here, but
Yeah.
is a child at elementary level better to start there, teen, or is
That's
adult?
that's a great question. I have not come across anything in research
Can I
on
say
that.
something? Can I add?
Yes, go ahead.
I used to work with a previous school with a Head Start actually, and you know Head Start is part of a government program, and it's the DCF program actually. So part of the research and part of the program they put the social emotional. It should be every day talked about, and it should be on the curriculum.
Yeah.
So we have to go through that every day, daily with the children.
Yeah.
No, I know we expose them every day. Now, my question was more if they
What's-
develop
what's
like
the
their
impact?
brain actually,
Yeah.
the impact is better when they're
Yeah.
a teen or a child.
Yeah.
Because teen,
But
I know
if
is
they
someone
start with them when
The
they're
child
children.
learns specific attributes throughout their life.
For example, from 0 to 3, they're learning the social connection,
Yeah.
that trust connection.
Yeah.
From 6 and to 10, like,
Yeah.
was the social awareness quality.
So this is a great question. I am not an expert in early childhood development or in child development, in just in general human development. What I've seen though in terms of like emotional intelligence is that they've seen positive results with adults. So I think the number one thing that you've seen, and this is done mostly with adults, I should say that, right? This is at least the emotional intelligence framework, mostly with adults, but it's rolling out in different places. Again, Yale University is doing a lot of good work in this. But it really works well with adults. So I'm assuming it would be better within the scope or the framework within adolescents. By the way, the entire literature on adolescents and emotional intelligence training is very little. And I've done literally several papers on this, so it's very, very little. So I don't think there's an overall scope perspective. I would say though, I think just kind of like basic development is that the earlier that you get this incorporated, the better, right? It makes sense. I know that 50%, I'm not sure again how much psychology, this is, I just kidding. My professor just gave me this stat yesterday, or last week. 50% of mental disorders occur before the age of 14. 50% of all mental disorders in adults occur before the age of 14. So there's usually, the younger you do this, the better, but I'm not sure that there's research on that, but that's a great question. Yes? I'll take 2 more questions.
Is anyone familiar with Eric Erickson? Is he the one that talks about trust versus mistrust from work like to
I'm not
6
sure.
months? And nobody psychology. Anyway, but I think it's from newborn that if a child is hungry and you don't respond, they're gonna come up with different.
Oh, there's an important emotional development at a young age.
Ignoring
Yes.
a child, a newborn, that child is gonna grow up totally different. than
Yes,
someone.
yeah, that's
So
100%.
I think it starts from work,
Most likely. Most likely, yes. Last one. Yes.
Like, I think like there are people who are naturally more emotionally
Yes, yes, yes.
than others, right?
Yes, so there's
a variety.
it's
And those different scopes too.
yes, it's a bell curve, right? It's on a bell curve. Some have a natural leaning, some don't, but it can be taught and learned absolutely and improved with anybody. Yes, monsieur, absolutely. All right, Jazakallah khair, everybody. Barakallah fikum. Our second session is going to be at, I think it's 3, it's in the program, I think it's at 3:30? 2:40, everybody. So I guess we should start. I guess I was waiting for a signal, but I shouldn't wait for a signal. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam. Of course, we begin, as we do, and it's a very blessed gathering, and we should always begin by praising Allah, our Creator and our Sustainer, testifying to His oneness and His greatness, and testifying to the Prophet of His most beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, jazakallah khair everybody for it's a long day. I'm sure it's a grueling day. It feels like a school day, except you're on the other side of the classroom. So we ask Allah to accept from all of you and to allow this to be a means of benefit for, I know the year is about to start and there's probably a lot of excitement just for the first 2 days, and then it'll fade away and it's like, oh, back to the school grind. But we ask Allah that this day helped us be more equipped to handle some of our challenges and issues for our community. So this is session 2 of the emotional intelligence, creating leadership qualities in adolescents or young people and youth I hope, inshallah, that the first session was beneficial. I know there's probably some new people here. I'm going to give a quick snapshot of what we went over. And I got some recommendations to simplify some of the concepts and terms, and I think I'll be able to do that as we dive into each of these components of emotional intelligence a little bit more. So at a high level, we discussed the importance of the relationship between our emotions, our emotional states, and the impact it has on our personal well-being and our relationship quality and how we interact with others. We talked a little bit about some of the benefits, particularly for adolescents, that this concept of emotional intelligence has on their performance, whether improvements in school, in life satisfaction, on mental health, their improvements on decision making, motivation. We talked about how it improves their ability to understand and empathize with others, have definitely a sense of impulse control. So we mentioned some of the research around emotional intelligence and its impact. Then we pretty much set up what the framework is for emotional intelligence. And I'll go over it again. It's a 4-model framework. There is a 5-model framework out there as well. But it kind of sets up the model for in terms of how to train or teach around emotional intelligence. It kind of sets up the framework. So the first step of the model, or the first component, is self-awareness. Can somebody briefly tell me what self-awareness is or was, as we discussed in the first session? Self-awareness. Anybody want to take your crowd? Yes, go ahead, sister.
It's a means of being aware of one's emotions, managing your moods and feelings, regulating those, and your reactions to the things that.
Okay, good, very good. I think you mixed a little bit of 1 and 2.
Okay.
So the awareness is just the perception and being conscious of your emotions and what triggers them.
Okay.
And when they're triggered. It's the consciousness of emotions. Very good, so that's excellent. So the awareness of emotional states. You're aware, again, a lot of times, people are angry and they don't feel it. They're jittery, they're angry, they don't realize it. They're unhappy. They don't understand how to identify a sadness, right? They're really, they're heartbroken. So they mask in anger, right? So we do a lot of weird things with emotions, but really identifying emotions, being aware of them, is the first step. Excellent. The second one is then, self-management is what? Also relatively self-explanatory, yes?
To be able to know the value of self-regulation.
Very good, so be able to self-regulate. What does that mean in a basic sense?
To be able to, to manage your feelings, moods, and
Very good.
to know how to react to certain feelings.
Okay, very good, excellent. So to manage them in a positive way, right? And not in a negative way. Learn how to deal with different challenges that you have, situations that you might overcome, and deal with them. Is that, a quick question, is that to say that we're not supposed to feel sad? You're supposed to feel sad, yes? You're supposed to feel lonely? We are supposed to experience life. But we have to know how to do what? We'll talk about it in a second. You have to know how to do what? How to manage it so that it's not detrimental to your mental, emotional health, right? And physical, and it affects everything, as you mentioned, right? Your emotional, mental health definitely affects your physical, but you're absolutely right. Being able to regulate means I go, as we'll talk about in a second, how do I go from one state to another state? In a healthy way, in a way that's conducive to who I am as an individual, right? So that's important. Well, again, we're going to dive into each, but we're just capturing the highlight. The third of them is social awareness. What does social awareness mean? Anybody in the back? I always used to sit in the back. I know the strategy of the back. Anybody in the back about social awareness? What is social awareness? Yes, sister. All the way in the back. MashaAllah.
Social awareness is to know how a person's feelings will be interpreted by the other party. That could be one aspect.
Very good. So interpretation of other people's feelings. Good. Very good. What else?
The ability to look for cues to help you figure out how somebody is feeling.
Okay, cues, very good. And I emphasize on one particular
Empathy.
thing. Empathy, very, very good. So empathy is not just interpreting. What is empathy?
It's an intrinsic action that happens within.
Okay, very good. What does it do? What does it
It's
mean?
putting yourself in the other person's shoes
Very good.
imagine, justifying their emotions and feelings.
Very good, very good. It's a shift of perspective, and it's the ability to, you cannot feel somebody else's emotions, but to reflect with them on their emotions, right? To be there with them in their emotion. That's empathy. And that's a very important part of social awareness. Excellent, very, very good. MashaAllah, 100 on the test in the back. Okay, very good. Then when you have these, when you have two are internal, like I mentioned, they happen within you. They're within yourself, self-awareness and self-management. Then two are outside of you. It's a social skill. One is awareness of others. The second then is managing others. What did I refer to relationship management? What did we say that is? Yes?
Be able to say what we want in a very clear way.
Okay, very good. So you're able to communicate with them about emotions.
Emotional response.
Very good. What else? Yes?
Being able to give information, make requests.
Okay, very good. I mentioned one important thing. Not just you're communicating one way, then what are you trying to do in relationship management?
Paying attention.
Yeah, attention is a part of it. It's also about being able to,
Take criticism.
yeah, so take criticism, but it's about being able to influence them. Being able to mediate or have them handle or them be influencing them in a positive way, right? Emotionally. So making them happier, motivating them, connecting with them, building trust with them. These are all relationship management, right? These are just social skills, right? Because you have to have an influence with them emotionally, right? How do I influence others emotionally? That's a part of relationship management. Is that clear? Is there any confusion around the four concepts? Okay, great, excellent. So let's dive into each one. Now again, for those that this is their session, this can apply to all humans, but I'm very focused on teens or youth in this particular situation because that's the research that I was asked to present, and kind of that's the focus for us as educators or people working with teens. Some of this can apply to younger, and of course, as you probably have all seen, it definitely applies to all of us, right? So it's a general framework. Okay, great. So the first skill. So how do I build? Okay, very good. First is self-awareness. Self-awareness. So off the bat, what is the first thing you think of when you hear the word self-awareness? For yourself, what does that mean to you?
You know what's happening within you.
Okay, very good. So I know what's happening within me. Good, very good. What is it like? What is it like?
Having mindfulness?
So mindfulness is a part of it. I'm going to speak about mindfulness, but it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more than that. What is it really? It's an assessment. It's a personal assessment. Being able to personally assess your emotional state. Like, where am I? Why am I here? Right? So the first thing they say is it's a self-assessment. It can be defined as having the ability to recognize one's emotions, for sure, but then one's competencies, strengths, weaknesses, values, motivations, and understanding what impact they have on me. Now, mindfulness is a practice that can get you to get there, right? But just the assessment, just being able to sit down and understand your drivers, your values, your emotions, because again, I mentioned before, I showed on the slide before, they're all interlinked, right? What's important to you is making you frustrated, you don't realize it, right? What's driving you is making you feel anxious, you're not realizing it. So it's this self-assessment that's super important. And it comes from various ways, obviously reflection and different things I could talk about, but the first of them is to reflect on emotion. So the habit or the ability to reflect on emotion. Now again, this is an important concept when you're dealing with youngsters, that they don't spend enough time reflecting on emotion. And usually as parents or as educators, we don't have time for the emotion stuff, right? It's like, you're a bad kid, just be quiet. You need to go to detention. Just go to Rizwa. Just get out of my classroom. But there's a geyser that's about to explode. It's exploding in front of you. But why is it exploding? So it's first reflecting on emotions. That requires, and just some of the things, right, so that we'll talk about. So when you reflect on when somebody sends you an email, this is like an adult example so you understand. When somebody sends you an email and they're just kind of calling you out, do you reflect on, oh wow, that really irked me. And you know actually what happens to us? You're thinking about that email 3 hours later. You didn't realize that you were just yelling at your kids because you were angry about the email. Like I just went off on my kids. But really it was just like a really annoying email that irked me. If you just take a moment to reflect on the emotion, it's just reflection. A moment where if somebody cuts you off or a friend comes to you and they're crying about something. So reflection of emotion actually means to experience the emotion, like actually be there. And that's very difficult for children. So how do you train this for adolescents? How do you train this for youngsters? Again, I'm trying to make this practical now. This is one example on reflection of emotion. How do we practice this with adolescents? Not here at lecture, you guys are all smarter than me.
I mean, as simple as, take a deep breath and,
Okay, very good. I'm going to talk about breathing in a second. Good. The calmness is very important. Very good. Reestablishing neutrality or calmness, very good. But how do you get them to reflect?
Asking them questions.
Very good, very good. What kind of questions?
Open-ended.
Very good. Open-ended, specific questions.
How do you feel? What makes you feel?
Yeah, so, everybody gets asked, hey, how you doing? Right? It's an open-ended question. Usually, what do you say? The answer is, Alhamdulillah. Right? My kids are driving me crazy. One of them is suicidal. One of them, has major issues. But alhamdulillah, right? Everything's great. I got a promotion. I'm about to see the CEO. I'm about to go public with my company. Alhamdulillah, right? There's this, perception of like, there's an image that you're trying to give. But when somebody asks you, for example, hey, how are you feeling this afternoon after class? Hey, how are you guys all feeling after 5 sessions at the conference today, after all this material? Right? So you're analyzing it in a very specific way. So yes, the question is open-ended, but it has to be specified in a particular way. Now, I mentioned this to the parents yesterday. Really, the best teacher is life experiences, right? There's a fight. There's an argument. There's something going on. Something happens, managing the classroom. Something happens in a classroom. It's the experiences that are the teaching moments, right? You guys know it's not the textbooks, right? Okay, good. That's good. It's good to know. So the best textbooks in the world don't teach the life experiences. So being able to stop, pause, and have the ability to reflect with them is very, very important. Now, of course, as parents, like I mentioned, right? We do this probably the shortest fuses with our kids because we don't have I don't have the time. I don't have the time, right? I don't have the time to deal with this now. I don't have the time to talk to you. I don't have the time but really, most of our life is these moments of just sitting in an experience and having youngsters reflect in it. And that's, again, super important for adolescents. So the skills here that I'll refer to, let me give you some of the tangible skills in training that are used. So first, you teach them how to, here it is. Okay, so you introduce the ideas that feelings matter. Number 1, feelings are important. By the way, again, I know that Yale uses these in school, so they give a lot of examples. So classrooms where teachers spend time, and again, I'm not judging curriculums, I'm just talking about this is so important. Just like they need to go to lunch and go outside for a physical activity, them understanding how to manage their emotional states is just as powerful a learning tool needed for them to have in their life, right? It's probably even more important. So, how are they able to understand that feelings matter, right? There's schools in New York that the first thing that kids do when they walk into the class is that they mention the feeling that they're feeling, right? That there's boards everywhere where people are able to identify or go to stand in line with what feelings that they're feeling. Feelings are important. Feelings matter. Feelings are valuable. You don't shun them. You don't sweep them under the rug, right? So that's important. Number 2, you discuss, and here, we're generating some things. You're discussing real situations where the feelings are taken into the account, right? Experiences are one of them, but a fight, an argument, a child is acting out, right? Let's just take that as a simple example. More likely than not, what's going on with the child? They're just a bad kid?
No.
They're just a bad kid.
No.
What's going on?
Something.
There's something going on. Okay, how am I as an educator supposed to find out what that something is? I have a classes control. I'm doing a million things. What am I supposed to do? I'm sorry? In the middle of class, Kawas, we're gonna put the signs, guys. Okay, forget about photosynthesis for a second. We're gonna talk about the emotional synthesis in Abdullah, all right? Okay, very good. So there are times where you, as a teacher, and again, I'm not training you guys as teachers, but there are times where you have to be able to manage or have the individual reflect directly with them on what's going on. So it could be, hey everybody, guys, read this paragraph to yourselves, and you handle it with the child, right? Some of the techniques. It's the end of class, I need to speak to you after, right? It's not shaming, guilting, that does nothing, right? For our kids or for our students, right? That's not the direction. So it's important to have, again, what was the main take home here? Feelings are important. Feelings matter. That's step number 1. Under this also, the second step, and I'll go to it here, is understanding where I am at certain moments. So then, again, the awareness, we're talking about awareness, right? So feelings are important. But then I have to identify where I am. Where am I on the scale? So this is a scale metric that people, researchers use. They try to use these. Again, this is just for educational purposes, right? You're not going to sit there and plot. But if you were to, for 1 second, plot yourself right now. Where are you? So the x-axis is energy. The y-axis is pleasantness. Of course, I'm colorblind. But yellow, right? That's yellow, right? Yellow is I'm feeling very excited, and I'm in a state where I'm really joyous. Okay? What is blue? Give me. What does it mean? Give me. Generally, you're very mellow, right? So energy is very low, and you're sad. Yeah, So again, we think of sadness as bad, but sadness is reflective. You get upset through evolutionary kind of studies, right? From evolutionary psychology. Sadness is so important for you to be able to sit, reflect, have moments where you're just calm, even if you're crying, even if you're upset. That's very important. The Prophet said would cry so much. Umar would cry so much. Abu Bakr would cry so much. Our husbands cry never much. Right? So why is that? Why is that there? There are social components that have to do with it, but really self-awareness is just the first part, right? I gotta be able to admit, hey, just in a sad state right now. I want to give you guys. So it's the same grid, but all the words that can be used, right? So all the words that are used for emotion, we think of emotions as like 5 words, right? But there are so many different words for the different phases of where you are. And subhanAllah, the language is the second. So we talk about. So far we've talked about reflecting on emotions. The second is being able to identify emotions. So some of the strategies that they do. Okay, so first naming them, right? SubhanAllah, you only learn this when you have kids. I have 2 kids, so I reflect. So Maryam tells me Baba, my stomach hurts. I'm feeling pain. Does she feel pain? Actually, what is she feeling? She's about to do something? Yeah, she's anxious. Very, very good. She doesn't have the vocabulary yet to say, I'm feeling anxious. So your son will tell you they're feeling pain. You'd be like, what's wrong with you? Go drink some water. Like, wait, hold on, no. She's not feeling pain. They're anxious. So being able to identify is super important. So in the yellow, what we talked about, the highest is ecstatic. Then there's elated, excited, thrilled, blissful. On the opposite end, I'm just giving the extremes, but you guys can look at them. There's disgusted, pessimistic, alienated, despondent, despair. See how many different words there are just for emotions? Now, we never took a class on emotions, right? As a matter of fact, emotions were not important for most of our life. So we don't even know how to identify a lot of times where we're at. So what strategy that they do with kids is that they show them pictures and they have them identify. They show them movie clips. I'm talking about adolescents, right? I'm talking about adolescents. You show them movie clips, have them identify. Give them images, have them identify, right? Give them the ability to match what a feeling is to what the word is. Again, different things for them to identify emotions. Again, this is all under the concept of self-awareness, right? You cannot manage something that you're not aware of, right? So that's very, very, very important. A little bit of the grid here. So, any questions? Understanding the difference between anger and disappointment. There's a big difference. We mask them the same way, right? There's a difference. Understanding the difference between elated and being proud. Do I need to be elated every time with my child to show pride or proudness, right? So being able to measure and give the right thing. So these are some of the things. So labeling, expression, of course, just as a disclaimer, personalities, race, culture, gender, upbringing, all vary. They affect all of these, right? And again, within a Muslim context, it's important for us to know, like, we have our what's allowed thing, right? We all do. Our kids have it. We as parents, we have it. But a new language of emotions is required for awareness. And that's what we're trying to create here. I'll move away from awareness unless there's any other questions. So we talked about being able to reflect, and we talked about being able to identify under self-awareness. Reflection and identification. There's one more slide here for adolescents in particular that I'd like to talk about, but are there any questions on that first? Because it's something a little bit different. It's more about behaviors and action. Okay? Daniel Goleman, who is really one of the experts, you guys should know Daniel Goleman, should read up on him. He's got a great book on emotional intelligence. It's the hallmark on emotional intelligence. So get the book by Daniel Goleman. Yes?
So I know some children have a natural inclination to be more anxious, be more
Yes.
gloomy and
Yes.
heavy and so forth.
Yes.
You're saying that it's very important for them to internalize and understand those feelings that they're having.
Step one. Yes, step one is to understand. Yes.
So with a child like that, focusing on those emotions, would that make them internalize it as like a self-fulfilling prophecy instead
Their
of
self-identity.
reverting, like a self-identity
Yeah.
versus reverting to a positive outlook of the same situation, or does that fall into management?
Right. No. So that'll fall into management. What you're talking about is, okay, I know I'm here. How do I shift across the grid? Right.
For a child whose
Yeah.
natural tendency is
Right.
wanting
So-
to discuss it, right? But
Yes.
if they're constantly discussing it,
Right.
isn't that making them constantly remember it?
So constantly discussing it is not giving them the ability or teaching them the ability to identify it, right? So being able to identify emotions is what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about, like, in a therapy session, we're just going to talk about the emotion all the time. It's more of a reflective moment, and then two different skills. With experiences, you're reflecting. But this is more teaching. How do we teach them to identify, right? Does that make sense? I think, ask the question when I go to management, if I cover it under management, because this is just step one. It's not the end all be all. Any other questions? Okay, great. So again, we're talking about adolescents, and I know maybe I'm not talking about children, we're talking about adolescents, right? So there's also a level of, I think, more of a maturity that they can possibly have in knowing these these concepts. So the third thing I wanted to talk about is adolescents only. So Daniel Goleman, he mentioned, he says, after 20 years of research in emotional intelligence, I came to the conclusion that there's really one main driver of positive self-awareness and being able to drive motivation in individuals. And he says, this is his words, that people who are able to find a zone where they're living their life between their passions, their strengths, and things that they value and add value to them, they are able to find immense emotional health and productivity and motivation. Now, he mentions this, of course, and he consults with companies and different things of that sort, and he does a lot of this with them. But if we reflect on this from an adolescent perspective, and I told this to the parents yesterday, there's a lot of times where adolescents are starting to develop these tendencies, passions, competencies, strengths, places where they're really good at, things that they're good at. And then things that are then the self-fulfilling prophecy, where they're adding to their own self-efficacy, or their self-value, their self-worth. Like when I'm doing this, I feel I belong, I feel that I'm able to, it's making me a better who I am, better at who I am. So he mentioned that, and I really, maybe this is not for educators as much, because you guys have a curriculum, you're trying to teach it, right? But for a parent, or for an after-school teacher, or for a coach, or for a mentor, or for a community, somebody that's working with adolescents, finding this within them is super important. This is kind of like that person. I can give you a lot of examples that I have. Again, I've worked in a third space, youth centers, I've worked at Masajid community centers, so I've never been in the classroom. But when they come after school and they're going to find something, this is kind of like, it does magic to what they can do as individuals. When you find them and position them around things that they're strong at, that they're good at, things that they're passionate about, and things that they value and it's important to them, and it adds value to who they are. And I can give a lot of examples. Yes?
Actually, there is a movement called neurodiversity within the classroom that has that exact perspective of utilizing the students' positive attributes to contributing to the classroom as a whole. So they are bringing it into the classroom.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing. What is it called again?
It's called neurodiversity within the classroom.
Neurodiversity within a classroom. That's amazing. I'm sure there's books, literature, stuff on that. You guys should write down that concept. I definitely learned it, and I will use it. Neurodiversity. So the concept again is focusing. It's also strength-based education is a big thing now. But I know a lot of times like it doesn't work out for our Islamic school's curriculum and deen of education, right? So that's okay. You just understand the concept and how effective it can be wherever you can apply it, particularly with adolescents. Okay? All right. Yes?
But why are you saying it can't apply to the Islamic studies?
So it could. Okay, I didn't say it cannot. I love the Islamic school education and curriculum and all this stuff. It's just how do you incorporate it in? Because this really requires a lot more hands-on, activity-based, experimentation, being able to volunteer and do things, like go out into the world and do different things, like speak, like organize, like budget, like finance, like deal with, like plan, like analyze, right? So it requires a lot of experiential learning. And usually the classroom is not focused on experiential learning. Yes. And we need to move there. And if you guys study psychology, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what these teachers are doing. There's always a gap between where we're supposed to be and where we're at. So we're just trying to, again, bridge that gap, right? And that's all as best as possible. Okay, so let me move into the second part. What's the second component of emotional intelligence?
Self-management.
Self-management. Very good. Okay, so everybody's tired of it. So let's self-manage a little bit. How can we self-manage our tiredness?
We could stand. We could stand up for a while.
Okay, good. So if you want to stand up and you feel that'll help you, stand up. How else can you self-manage from being tired to a little bit more hopeful? You can make coffee. You can use artificial inorganic substances. Or it's an organic substance, but it's okay. That's good. What else? You can sit up. Just sitting up is good. Yes. You know one of the fastest ways? Rapidly breathe. So everybody very quickly, just take rapid breath. Ready, set, go.
Don't pass that around.
Very good. So, very good. What did you tell your body? You tell your body, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I gotta breathe. And actually nothing's going on, but it got more wakeful, right? So different ways to self. What are we doing? Self-managing. By the way, the coffee situation, unfortunately, most of the time this is advice, right? Most of the time we manage emotions through some kind of substance, right?
Yeah.
So all addictions, cocaine addiction, heroin addiction, LSD, all addictions are emotional behavioral problem, emotional cognitive problem, right? And any addiction. And by the way, because what you're trying to do is you're feeling sleepy, so you're just stimulated, or you're feeling sad, you just grab the ice cream and you're eating, or you're feeling down, and we're just coping. Particularly, it's a Band-Aid, it's quick fixes. I'm feeling pain, I'm popping the. Sorry for the doctors, right? This is like, just take the. I can't feel this way anymore. Just take it quickly. So what happens is that we get used to what? Never sitting in emotion. America consumes 75% of the world's prescription drugs. Did you guys know that?
That's true.
Okay, the overwhelming majority of prescription drugs in the world are obviously consumed in America. So that's why we have a healthcare epidemic, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. But one of them is that what we learn is that people do not want to sit in their emotions much, right? Because there's no, how do you manage? One of the best protective factors of managing emotion is religious practices, actually, right? And as Muslims, it's obviously part of the fact. So let's get into it. Okay, how do I regulate emotion? Regulating emotion really is it's a discipline, if you will. You could call it a discipline. It's the ability to control or redirect emotions and adapt to changing circumstances to move them in a positive direction, right? We're always trying to move them towards a positive direction, right? So one of the ways, and there's a lot of ways that I could discuss here, but one of the ways particularly is with youngsters, I'm sifting through this so I can get to the important parts, is that let's go to, I'll go to the next slide. So how do I do it? Two main ways I'm going to focus on. The first of them is what we call creating a gap. I'll write it down. Learning to teach or create a gap between stimulus and response. This gap between stimulus and response, that's the most important gap probably in life, right? That's the difference between staying married for a long time and not. That's the difference between staying awake in a classroom or not. It's the difference between almost any decision in life. Is the difference between a stimulus, something in the environment that is trying to drive you in a particular way, and how you respond. So Daniel Goleman talks about creating a larger gap, creating distance in the gaps, so that when something hits us, we're not reacting right away without. You got to go for I think we all know the difference between in the depth of your brain. There's the amygdala that's always responding to crises, problems, fear, and then your midbrain, or your for the most part your midbrain, is where all the impulses of your body come in. But all decision making, good, rational decision making and thought process happens where? At the front of the brain, right? So there is a gap there. Even physiologically, there's a gap there. So what you want to do is be able to get to what we call higher order thinking, to be able to have better regulatory abilities. Fancy words for saying, look, just don't react to everything. You learn how to control your reactions. It's just a fancy way of saying it. All right? So how do I do that? One of them is by creating distance between the stimulus and the response. How do I do that? Some ways. One of them is up there.
Mindfulness.
Okay, one of them is definitely mindfulness. Mindfulness practices are a way of building time where you're sitting, you're learning to create a time where you're extremely mindful and you're able to, I'm trying to get it exactly here, being able to create a state of the brain where you're able to just be in a moment and not react. And the more you do that, the more stronger your regulatory abilities are. Mindfulness is important for learning, yes or no? Yeah. Yes, it is. Very, very important. Particularly attention. So Daniel Goleman says, in the brain, neurologically, attention and mindfulness are in the same place. They're the same wiring. So for example, when your mind drifts away, how quickly you bring it back helps you in your overall self-management and regulation. It's like a muscle. So when you're trying to focus on something and it drifts away, and then you bring it back, that muscle, that ability, that skill helps you in your emotional regulation, right? So that's one of the lessons of mindfulness practices, that you learn to direct consciously your abilities. Let's do one, okay? Let's all do one. Let's everybody stand up, quickly. If I went to Google, they'd give me a lot of money for this, but I'm with you guys today. Okay, very quickly, I want to shake you guys up. So there's a lot of them, but this is called the body scan. Anybody ever heard of the body scan? Okay, good. MashaAllah, that's good. All right, so just calm down, relax. I know everybody's uncomfortable. Just put your hands by your side. And no, put your hands by your side. And try to get to a state of just calmness. Okay, good. Close your eyes. And breathe. Just breathe. Most moms don't even get this for 5 seconds. And it's really important. Just take a deep breath, inhale, exhale, okay? Now, all I want you to do is think about what I'm telling you while you're taking deep breaths, okay? Think about your toes. Deep breaths, deep breaths. Think about your feet. Think about your knees. Think about your stomach. Think about your shoulders. Think about your biceps. Think about your fingers. Think about your nails. Think about your head. Think about your breath. Think about your inhale and your exhale. Think about your breath. Continue to think about your breath. Think about your chest going up and down. Inhale and exhale. Okay, open your eyes. See how calming that was? Everybody take a seat. Taking moments where you're able to just step out of everything is extremely important. By the way, there's a lot of different kinds of mindfulness practices. Some are called love and kindness. Some are called, like we just talked about, concentrated focus. Some are called, I mean, if you think about it, all of these various, there's a bunch of them, they're all really incorporated in one thing that we're supposed to do and do this all the time. This is salah, right? So salah is, to me, an extremely important mindful practice. But usually we don't go in with the mindful state of consciousness into it. And that's why we don't get the rewards. By the way, the Prophet ﷺ told us one of the first things my ummah will lose is their khushu' and salah. Right? It's one of the first things. Because all of a sudden life is happening, but I don't take time to just slow down. Again, mindfulness practices has been linked to the ability to control emotions. I want to give you a quick example. I'm not making I'm not giving tafsir or anything. But the Prophet ﷺ, for about 3 to 4 years before he became a prophet, he would go to somewhere and just sit and breathe. Anybody know where that place is? Cave Hira on Jabal Nur. Now it's called Jabal Nur, right?
Yes.
So the Prophet would go up there and be there for days, weeks, and months. Is he reading anything? Is he reciting anything? Is he talking to anybody? Okay. One of the scholars, they mentioned the Prophet learned to go breathe on the mountain. And I was just like, whoa. whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh my God. Oh my God. You're talking to me. So the Prophet went and learned to sit on a mountain by himself and just breathe so that he can, because I don't think any other human would need to be more in control of who they were for the rest of their life. Right? Like, I mean, the next 23 years would be the most difficult years ever. So, the Prophet learned the ability, just through breathing, about how to, this Sheikh also mentioned the importance of breathing in Salah and how that plays a tremendous impact on your Salah, etc., etc. So there's a lot we're missing, right? Alhamdulillah. But Allah's infused everything in there, right? It's in there. We just have to kind of pick around and find it and pull it out. So that's one of the amazing gems. The second one, so with kids, what do? They teach younger kids, some of the examples I know from younger kids, is that they teach them to sit with a ball on their chest or something on their chest and just have them watch their breath. They teach youngsters to take time, like literally adolescents, they're just so stimulated, we're very overly stimulated, like take some time where you're just destimulated, you're detoxing from all the stimulation. And again, that's one of the practices of emotional intelligence that has played a profound role. Mindfulness in corporate training now is like hot money, all right? If you want to become a practitioner of mindfulness practice, they will pay you a lot of money to have a room stand up and learn to breathe and think about different parts of their body. Sounds funny, but I'm being really honest. Okay, so mindfulness practice, stimulation response, mindfulness practice. Let me see if I missed any points here I wanted to discuss. Yes, okay, any questions on this before I move on? Okay, the third part, I'm sorry, we have 5 minutes. Okay, the next one is social awareness. And again, this is pretty straight up. And obviously social awareness is first the ability to understand and be aware of other people's emotions. So I'll give you 2 books, or at least kind of 2 references to this that are very important. The first of them is Paul Ekman, and he's done a lot of work and research around the ability to recognize emotions in nonverbals, right? So what they literally do to adolescents is that they'll click through slides. Can you identify this emotion? Can you identify this emotion? Watch a movie, like I mentioned. They'll do different things where they're able to identify emotions in other people. So he's done extensive amount of work across cultures and like facial recognition and how do we express sadness? How do we express happiness? And there's like 3 or 4, I don't know them off the top of my head, but there's like 4 or 5 that are absolutely universal in all languages and all cultures throughout history. One of them, the one I know, is disgust. It's universal. Some are not, by the way. Some are not. Happiness is on a big spectrum, right? How different cultures show happiness, like facially. But Paul Ekman has done a lot of work on nonverbals, facial recognition of emotions, innate hidden emotions and how we show them, right? What does it mean when you're crossing your arms? What does it mean when you're standing with your legs wide, right? They all mean something. Remember I told you that your emotions are always dictating your behavior? Even the behavior you don't think about, it's dictating. I'll give you one, which is crossing your arms. What is that? Anybody know what crossing arms means?
Defensive.
It is defensive, but what does it mean? Where is it coming from?
Protecting yourself.
Yeah, but am I afraid?
Yeah.
Is it from fear?
Yes.
No, it's not from fear. So that's why by the way, I know people say that. People think when you do this, it's because you're afraid.
Yeah.
You could be afraid, but you're not afraid of the person in front of you. You know what you're afraid of? You're afraid of something inside that you don't want to show. Right? So it could be something so simple. It could be, I'm sorry? It's an emotion, yeah. So I'll give you an example. It happens, I'll give you an example of me, for example. I got a shirt out of the closet. I ironed it. I just didn't like it. I don't think this is the best color. But you know what? I'm just going to put it on. I'm in a rush. So I put on the shirt. I go and I speak in front of people. And I'm standing talking to somebody. And I go like this because I thought about I thought about my shirt. Oh, you didn't think that decision was an emotional connection to how you're feeling this moment? It does. The next time you cross your arms, think about what you're thinking about. It is something you're afraid of within you, not from the other person across from you. Okay? And there's a lot more to it, by the way, but it's just those simple things, right? That we've learned about how humans react. Isn't it amazing? right? So simple social awareness. Social awareness. If someone in front of you is talking to you and they're not looking you in the eyes, or a kid is, their hands in their pockets, right? Everything means something. Their hands are behind their back, their hands are in front of them, right? Their hands are crossed. Everything means something. But the more aware we are of these social cues, the more we do. By the way, we have a whole class with one of our instructors, Muhammad Hassan, on communication. He has 2 hours about non-verbal communication. Okay, this is not, I'm giving you this in 2 minutes. But literally you can study and go through all of this. Yes?
Sorry. Is there a book for...
Paul Ekman has a lot of books on them. So
a lot of them.
He has a lot of them, but there's a good amount of books. There's some good stuff. I like more research-based stuff. There's some stuff that's just like, somebody thinking about a concept and they do it. But there's a lot of good research on it. Paul Ekman is the one I definitely know about. And that's really good. Yes.
I was just thinking that this would also vary from culture to culture.
100%. You're absolutely right. And he goes through the differences in that, right? What it means for you to bow, right? Or how you stand, or where you look, or what you look at, right? Different, for sure. But I think from an American culture, we've all adapted pretty much, and the Western world has a lot of influence on even our nonverbals now. So it's good to know. Okay, so social awareness. The second thing under social awareness I'll talk about, and I don't have time to do it, is empathy. And that's the one that we want to focus on. And this is also very, very difficult, but here's one strategy of empathy that I'll give. They teach adolescents to be able to, what we call reflective listening. Reflective listening is when I'm trying to reflect your emotions in what I'm saying. So, for example, you seem sad. Is it because of? Right? So when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to get, I'm trying to understand their emotion and why it's there, I'm going to first tell them. Remember we said you have to communicate. You seem like you're down. Are you tired from all of the Rami's talking? Are you annoyed at all of Rami's talking? Right? So I'm trying to guess. Then they'd be like, you're going to work with them, but the idea is trying to reflect emotion in others through your responses or how you're listening to them. And that's one of the strategies in building empathy. There's a lot under building empathy, but that's one of the strategies that they teach in how to build empathy. So you build that culture, right? You build a culture. Hey, you seem excited. What's going on? Or, hey, you seem like you're down. Or, hey, you seem like you need a hug. You all right? So these kind of concepts are important. The last of them, inshallah, and I hope that was beneficial, is relationship management, right? I'm sorry? I have 8 more minutes. Oh, it's not 3:30? Oh, did we started late?
3:40.
3:40, perfect. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So, relationship management. This is obviously where, is a question?
About empathy.
Fadal.
I definitely subscribe to the idea of having empathy, especially for students and team members.
Yes.
But if you can have empathy with every single student or team member, it might be very taxing. Right?
It's draining.
Right.
Yes.
So I was just thinking of this thing, have preemptive empathy in a way. So if you know your students come from, they all might share certain pressure, like they don't belong outside the community and stuff. And if you're a teacher, and you can make a similar case for if you have employees, that you can start addressing that regularly. So kind of being preemptive and to get that 80-20 kind of
yes, that's a great.
Instead of always having empathy.
Of course, very good. Obviously, there's a lot of levels to empathy, teaching and training on empathy. But you're absolutely right. You can know going in. I came into the room very empathetic of the kids you guys deal with, right? I came in, I'm trying to put myself in those shoes. Okay, what would I need to listen to if I'm talking in front of 80 educators or 60 educators about what their biggest challenges are, right? That's a level of empathy. You know where a lot of empathy gets used now? In marketing training. Tons of empathy training happens in marketing training because the better they know the pain of the consumer, the better they design your ability to buy the product. They're not dumb guys, okay? We're not. Those commercials that you see, or those Facebook ads that you see, or those Instagram stories that you see, they're not just being done out of nowhere. There's a lot of design going into that, right? There's so much design. So again, understanding that this is always working around us, but it's different perspectives, right? There's empathy for a counselor, and there's empathy for a teacher. There's empathy for a CEO, right? And that's all obviously contextualized in particular ways. Great question. Yes, go ahead. You want to finish your point?
Yeah, one more thing. Part of having empathy is not to judge, right? And when it comes to kids, I think we always kind of think like they have the same experience as us, or they're being exposed to the same life experience as we did, but they're still not. And even if they've seen things, they don't really perceive it the same way we do. So do you think that's part of being better at empathy, recognizing that we're really two different levels?
Yes, so that's a great point. There's a lot of levels to empathy. There's ability to understand perspective. There's a level of relevance. There's a lot of levels, as you mentioned, judgmental or non-judgmental, right? How do you turn that off? How do you turn that on? So there's a lot that I can discuss. And honestly, I'm not an expert on empathy. Hassan, again, that communication course, he goes into empathy a lot. He has a lot of research done on it. So you're absolutely right. It's an immense field, just studying empathy. I think to a certain extent, though, you don't want to create barriers. Yes, you're right. You're at a different age, you're a different socioeconomic background, your development was very different, but it doesn't mean that you cannot connect at an empathetic level, right? So I think having the growth mindset that empathy is something that can be cultivated. You can become more, every human can become more empathetic, right? It's just about learning and practicing it and doing it deliberately a lot, and then you become better at it. But yes, there's always limitations, and by the way, there's different levels to it, right? There really are. Like, as a parent, if there's a crisis, you have to be a lot more empathetic than we're driving on a road trip and they've been annoying for 5 hours, right? So there's also levels to when you do it and kind of depth to it. But you're absolutely right. We should all try to do a better job of it and understand the overall context of it. And there's a lot we can talk about there. I have 2 minutes. Right, but all of these points that but by the way, there's a book by Daniel Goleman on empathy. That was the second book I wanted to mention, right? I mentioned 2 books. One was Paul Ekman on recognizing emotions. The second was on empathy by Daniel Goleman. That's a very, very important topic, and there's a lot of research done in it as well. The last part here that I'm going to mention is relationship management, and this obviously from a leadership perspective, right? Influence, communication, conflict management, changing, building bonds, collaboration, cooperation, building teamwork and team capabilities. This is all relationship management, right? And again, this is what we really focus on a lot is how do you build teams and things of that sort. So there's a lot that we can discuss here. I want to give you the practical ways that you can do this in a classroom. All right? Yes.
Could you please write down the name of the 2 authors?
Sure. I absolutely. I will. Inshallah. Yes, absolutely. So some of the ways that they so again, just discussing some of these. So creating situations where people have to analyze how to handle